Welcome to Next Man Up, proactive DFS strategies based on inactive NFL players. I'm Mike Davis, the Q&A columnist at fftoday.com, and I'm joined by survivor pool expert Matthew Schiff for this Christmas Eve installment of Next Man Up. Happy holidays, Matthew. What were some of your best and worst DraftKings decisions last week? Specifically, I'd like you to talk about Matthew Ryan. We said last week I didn't want to pay up for him. You did. I guess you win that argument. Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, the other thing is, you start looking at the different running backs, and we were talking about, last week how we were dumb not to play Le'Veon Bell and LaShawn McCoy the week before. This week, if you look at the rosters, you're looking at Le'Veon Bell and you're going, well, why would I want to play him? You're chasing the points. And that's one of the things. Do we want to chase points that were there the week before? No. You do not do that in your weekly. You do not do that in your annual fantasy pool. So that's why each week, exactly what you talked about, we're trying to find that differentiator that will help you win in that week.
Right. That's why we do focus so much on how injuries elevate players without their prices being reflected. And so, well, you know what? I want to quickly review my featured player, even though it's not tooting my own horn because I had the worst week of the season last week in last week's program. I should review it for the record and let people know how my featured players did. Anyone who played them knows they didn't do well. I expected a solid day from Alex Smith, who's playing at home with all of his receiving targets healthy. He finished with just 163 passing yards, a pick, and a rushing TD. At running back, I knew that untested Kenneth Farrow was a gamble in relief of Melvin Gordon, but I got to say, I assumed his floor would be higher than 39 yards rushing and a fumble. At wide receiver, Taylor Gabriel avoided a complete disappointment with a 9-yard TD reception, but his 60 yards in receiving only looked decent in comparison to my featured tight end, Antonio Gates, who finished week 15 no closer to the TD record for tight ends than when he started. And he had just 11 yards to show for his trouble. I will try to do better with this week's featured players, and of course it would be hard for me to do worse. Here's a reminder of the 3 self-evident principles underlying the player selection process at Next Man Up. 1, it's better to operate with more information than less, so we go out of our way to let the latest injury news influence our lineups. 2, the backups who fill in for injured stars are often thrust into high-volume situations that aren't reflected in their pricing on DFS sites like DraftKings. And 3, for tournament play, plugging in no-name backups who may come out of nowhere is an easy and effective way to achieve differentiation from the crowd. Now, with all that said, obviously, we do this show on Saturdays. We got a lot of football scheduled today, Saturday, and some of it's getting started in less than an hour. In the interest of time for our viewers, I want to make sure that we start with a ticket of Matthew's that's built around the 1 o'clock Eastern times today. Matthew, why don't you take us through that ticket?
Yeah, before I get into the ticket, you asked me a quick question about the review. Last week we went through, I ended up getting Devontae Freeman, who went off. And that was a great value, even though he was very expensive. The one value pick that we had, in fact, last week was Taylor Gabriel, really stepping up when Julio Jones was out. And Julio Jones is back this week, but I couldn't justify at the 1 o'clock game to put him in, on that ticket. So what I did was I started going down the rosters, and one of the things that I've done is I've not only used fftoday.com with Mike Kruger's ratings, but I also came across another site that I use rather frequently called FF Champs, that I've won about 30% of my pools over the last 10 years with their material. They have a tool that's called a GPP Master that actually works very well and gives you a weighting on points and a cost per point that you're going to use, similar to the type of stuff that we do here, except we're doing it through the video and giving you the commentary. They give you the statistics. So if you want to pay for a tool, their tool is very good. One of the things that we see in that tool is if you were to go look at specifically Phillip Rivers in that tool, Phillip Rivers comes up as a $6,900 play. His cost per point was about $300 cost per point, which was actually a very, very good value in their pricing scheme. With that in mind, I then had to find some running backs that would match up very nicely. Well, Melvin Gordon was out. Devontae Freeman, I'm going, $7,100, I could probably save $800 and find some better wide receivers. And I really, really like the combo of Antonio Gates and Phillip Rivers based upon, in fact, your column talking about it this week, where I go in and I talk about the survivor pool being San Diego versus Cleveland. Talk about a sweet matchup every single week. That has been the pick that you want to have. And yes, they're weak in the middle. Antonio Gates should get at least one tight end, if not two, to match Tony Gonzalez's record. And like we said, it's not a barn burner, but it's definitely something you'll want to watch if you want to see records broken. Ty Montgomery has become the full-time running back, and Michael Christine's going to play. But combine him with Devontae Adams, and I think that the weather being good in Green Bay on a 1 o'clock ticket is a great way of going. And yes, I overpaid for my Patriots, but the Jets are in such disarray. This should be a feast for them to go after sacks, fumbles, and even a potential interception. What are your thoughts?
I love the Pats as a defense this week. I would especially want to go out of my way to try to pair them with someone like LeGarrette Blount, because I can see that game just turning into a sort of rote performance of domination.
I agree.
The Jets have checked out. So I like every player on your ticket. It's gone now, but you had Jordan Howard, right?
No, Jordan Howard's right here on there. It's sitting. What happens is when we talk, you end up seeing what I have. And Jordan Howard, yes, was my number one. He was actually where I wanted to build this around because he's got so much play in this game. They're going to feed him the ball again and again and again. And Washington does give up a lot of rushing yards.
Okay, great. I think that's a fantastic ticket, and I appreciate you putting together a 1 o'clock featured ticket for viewers who want to get something in before kickoff. But with that out of the way, I want to move on to my featured players of the week, starting with, and this is a nice sort of segue, my running back, Jordan Howard. The reason I like him so much is because he faces a Redskins defense that is vulnerable to the run when healthy and has numerous defenders on the injury report this week, more than I can name. But it includes linebacker Sua Cravens, who's out, and Will Compton, questionable. So with all that in mind, I'm pretty excited about Jordan Howard's chances this week. You can see from my tickets, I've put him in all three of my top three tickets. I try not to get overexposed to any one player. So for my fourth ticket, I went out of my way not to use him, but I just love him. I could have used him in all four tickets this week. So some other things that I want to point out about this first ticket, the Tom Savage, DeAndre Hopkins pairing, that stack is going to catch a lot of people off guard. But here's what I want to point out. Last year,
value. I have to step in. Tom Savage is a value play. The fact that last week he threw 260 yards, which is a career high, totally from the last 4 minutes of the second period, the second quarter through the rest of the game, I think Hopkins and Will Fuller are a great combination. Houston has not performed well with Osweiler under center, and you're definitely taking advantage of something that is a value play in this week.
Okay, I appreciate that, Matthew, because I think what a lot of people have forgotten, because it seems 2015 seems ages ago, but just last year, the Texans went through 7 different starting quarterbacks. 7. Do you know how many of those quarterbacks failed to connect with Hopkins? 0. Every one of those 7 quarterbacks was successful using DeAndre Hopkins as a weapon. Brock Osweiler was the first of 8 quarterbacks to flub the situation he had with DeAndre Hopkins. Now we're going to Tom Savage. My money's on Savage to find his way back to Hopkins being the elite receiver that he was in 2015. That's the gamble that I'm taking a risk on in this ticket. I'm glad you liked it. I thought I'd get more pushback from you, honestly. And you can see that. Go ahead.
I love the idea behind it. The reason why is over the last few weeks, you and I have been putting different types of tickets together. This type of ticket is your value ticket. You're not going for your high dollar on the quarterback, but you're filling it in, again, on the running back and the tight end side, which I think Kyle Rudolph might be a good play, especially since Green Bay is soft in the middle.
Okay, yeah, that is what drew me to him this week. FF Today has Rudolph ranked fairly high for a tight end, and he fit my pricing structure. One thing I want to point out that I've done in this ticket and every ticket this week, now that we're at the end of the season and morale has a big impact on how games go, and of course we can't accurately predict game scripts, but game scripts happen whether we can predict them or not. And one of the most common game scripts is a dominant running game paired with a dominant defensive performance. Excuse me. So in all 4 tickets this week, I have paired a running back with a defense as a stack. So you can see here at the bottom, I've got Devontae Freeman plus the Falcons in case the Carolina Panthers check out in the way that the Jets have. And the Falcons just coast to victory in much the way that I sort of outlined the Patriots might versus the Jets. Okay, so that ticket seemed to make sense to you. I'm really pleased that you didn't want to fight me on Savage. I know, Matthew, you're also to move to my second ticket. My featured player here is my tight end, Jesse James. This has something to do with injuries to the Steelers. We've got Sammy Coates struggling with a hamstring injury, Ladarius Green with a concussion. So we're going to need other people to step up. That's why 2 of my featured players this week are Steelers. And that's what drove me to Jesse James as a value tight end this week. I think you share my enthusiasm about Phillip Rivers. Is that right, Matthew?
Very much so. The reason why is that he's going to be really trying to get 2 tight ends to Antonio Gates. Again, he's probably the highest rated quarterback for the value in the cost of what his cost per point is. I just want to take one step back with regards to the Houston and Cincinnati game. Lamar Miller was declared out as of today. He's out for the game. Therefore, Alfred Blue, who has not stepped up over the last 2 or 3 years in the past when Arian Foster was there, he's going to be taking the rock, and Savage will probably be required to pass the ball quite a bit between Fuller and Hopkins.
That is a great point. You're right. That is a fair point. Alfred Blue has never gotten it done. There's no reason to think that he will get it done. So all the more reason to roll the dice on Savage. Great point. You can see that in this second ticket, Howard figures again, along with Jay Ajayi as my running back tandem. And on this ticket, I stacked the Bears defense with Jordan Howard. I'm really excited about the receivers I was able to put together, considering that I already had Phillip Rivers. I've stacked Rivers with Tyrell Williams. I also put in T.Y. Hilton. Excited about him this week. Mike Evans. Sure, I'd like to have only receivers on teams that seem to be plowing straight to the playoffs, but Mike Evans is such a monster for Tampa Bay that it's hard to resist him when he fits your pricing structure as he did on this ticket for me. With Allen Hurns out for Jacksonville, this is an opportunity to put Marquise Lee in with a lot of confidence. So he's a tempting flex play for me here. Anybody on this ticket that stands out to you as needing maybe some rethinking, Matthew?
Well, I happen to like the T.Y. Hilton play against Oakland. Terrell Williams. Ooh, Terrell Williams. That is a question. You're playing. He's your pairing with Rivers instead of pairing it with Gates. I just think that if you have a choice of the 2 there, is there a way that you can get Gates in instead of Williams as your wide receiver pair?
Okay. Well,
because you don't have him on any of your other tickets, as far as I can see, he may be on your 4th ticket, but I don't see it on your 2nd.
Right. Okay. Well, Marquise Lee, I wanted to talk about him. He's a bit of a gamble. I mean, Jacksonville's hard to figure, but certainly I could put Gates in as a flex. I might have to tweak other pricing.
$4,400 if you have. He's $4,400.
And I have 43.
Right.
So where am I going to?
Rate comes in at 3,900.
Right, but if the point is to get in Gates,
that's the whole idea. And he's playing against the 32nd ranked defense against tight ends. That's the
okay.
One. That's the
let's see. I'll take Tyrell Williams out and get Gates in, and then let's see what I can do at receiver. How about that?
Exactly.
I'm leaving Jesse James in because he's my featured tight end of the week. So that for anyone wondering why I don't
that $2,500 play makes sense. Because Ladarius Green is not going to suit up this week.
So, okay. I'm looking at the receivers available to me here. Nobody's really getting me excited.
Yeah, the only one that does is Crowder and Snead. Snead against.
Let me see where Crowder is.
Snead.
Go ahead.
Snead against Tampa in a game that means something with Breeze, who's the cheapest of the quarterbacks for a value pick out there, is making me think that he may come in a right value play.
Well, okay, right. I hear you, except that I'm going with Rivers on this ticket, not Breeze. So I'm not that excited about Snead. I could be in another game with a Breeze ticket, another ticket with Breeze, but since I'm going with Rivers and Gates here already, I've already got the San Diego stack. I guess I'm gonna take my cue from FF Today's ranks. Jamison Crowder projected to be the 23rd best receiver this week. That's okay. I don't mind getting in on some Crowder action. Of course, that does run contrary to my Bears Howard stack, but as I've said before,
somebody
I don't
has
get
to catch the ball.
That stuff. Go ahead.
Somebody has to catch. And by the way, Jordan Reed is not suiting up.
Right. It's going to be a rough day.
Another piece of information that you take and put in as part of. Remember, in DraftKings, where you get points as a wide receiver is catches, and then yards, and then touchdowns. Yes, we could go for 3 touchdowns. That's 18 points. As a quarterback, that's only 12. But every reception, if he is the go-to receiver, like you go with a Julio Jones, you get 14 receptions. That's 14 points more than anybody else.
Great point. And with Jordan Reed out, you're absolutely on target. Crowder always figures more prominently when Reed's not active.
He plays the middle of the field. That's why.
Okay. So for my third ticket, Matthew, you might give me some pushback here. I know my quarterback selections always seem to provoke you. But here's my thinking on Matthew Stafford as my featured quarterback of the week. An injury to the Cowboys, unless they have pulled, as a defense, their overconfidence muscle by clinching the top seed in the NFC from their living rooms on Thursday night. So the thinking here is that the Cowboys are coasting at this point into the playoffs, and they could check out on Monday night, and Stafford could have a good game. That's a narrative that I'm not predicting, but I wanted to have one ticket with a stake in it. How's that landing on you, Matthew?
Well, excuse me. That's true.
It could. In other words, you admit it could happen. How likely do you think?
It could happen. However, I think Monday night's game is going to be such a defensive struggle. I think it's going to be opposite of what everybody thinks, because it's a game that Dallas can clinch the NFC and Detroit can get into the playoffs because the Giants lost to the Eagles. This is going to be a marquee game, and I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game at all.
Okay, right. And so I guess my point is I'm not sure what to expect, but I think that with the Giants loss on Thursday, the Cowboys might just feel like we don't even have to do anything. We're just no. Coasting.
I think they're at home. I think they're going to say they don't want Detroit in. They want to clinch right now. Detroit has every need or every desire to do it. I think Stafford's still a head case and doesn't have that killer instinct.
All right, and so we'll see next week how this worked out. But the logic here is what led me to a Stafford Tate stack. The other players here, I think we've talked about Jordan Howard. Matthew makes a good point about not chasing points on Lev Bell. He's still highly rated by FF Today this week. He fit my pricing structure. I'd certainly be willing to tweak the Bell choice in this lineup. My receivers, as you can see, are a bit on the cheap side. We got Tate, we got Cameron Meredith, whom I like this week. Actually, Barkley showed himself to be a better backup quarterback than people expected. He even played well in the cold. Yeah. So it seems likely that Alshon Jeffrey will draw the attention of Josh Norman, and so Cameron Meredith could easily emerge as a very viable wideout. But of course, he's not here because I expect that to happen. He's here because he's priced right, priced tempting.
Well, that's the thing. You've got a guy who's going to get between 6 and 8 targets to get in the game. He is rated under that FF Champs statistic program that they have as number 2 wide receiver as cost per points.
Wow, I had no idea they were that high on him.
You know who's number 1? Number 1 is Rashard Matthews.
Really?
At $4,900 for his cost per points.
Well, that's interesting, Matthew. That makes me want to figure out how to get Matthews in. Not on this ticket, because I took Marquise Lee out of another ticket. I do want to have some stake in him this week. I like his chances.
Don't do that so quickly, because Marquise Lee is number 8 on the list.
All right.
And Devontae Freeman is number 3 on that list.
A lot of my instincts are being validated right now.
His wide receivers, not Freeman. Devontae Adams.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So, you know what? Let's leave Lev Bell here. I'm gonna see what I can do about Rashard Matthews in the next one. Anyway, to continue on the theme, you can see that I've paired Carlos Hyde with the 49ers in a stack against an LA Rams team that who knows? I mean, who knows how well they're going to do.
Remember the last time they went out and trounced them 28-0.
Right. So it was tempting. Oh, before I move on, Matthew, is there anything you want to address on this ticket before I get to my 4th featured player?
No, I think we did a fairly good job. I think Golden Tate is going to have, he's that combo that you're doing. You're hoping that they're going to put up some points and some receptions. I think Detroit's going to be playing from behind, but I still believe that it's going to be a low-scoring affair.
And your instincts on these questions, Matthew, are almost always right. And so I certainly wouldn't put more than one ticket at risk on Stafford. But
it's a great ticket to put together as a potential. But again, to our viewers, you need to understand when you put a ticket together like that, that ticket is designed to give you that, wow factor. And again, at times, you may want to pick pieces of each of our tickets and put one ticket together like we did a few weeks ago, and we actually did very well.
Right. That's what I hope viewers are doing. I don't suspect that many viewers are actually just copying our tickets. What I want them to do is hear our arguments for things. And yes, I often argue from game scripts, and game scripts are, as many analysts point out, impossible to predict. But if a game script seems particularly likely to you as a DraftKings player to play out, then use that game script that I'm recommending if it appeals to you, and then use a game script that Matthew's recommending if that appeals to you. And that puts the idea is that will help you build tickets that play on your instincts. Because part of the thing about tournaments is you got to play instincts. If you're just trying to play smart, play cash. If you're not going to entertain the long shot instincts you have, you shouldn't be messing around with tournament play anyway. All right, but that's an aside. Takes us to our 4th ticket, where my featured player is wide receiver Eli Rogers. And again, this has to do with injuries on the Steeler offense, with Sammy Coates and Ladarius Green being hurt this week. So I've stacked Ben Roethlisberger with Rogers, and this ticket was so cheap that it allowed me to afford Lev Bell, but I am not stoked about triple stacking Bell with Roethlisberger and Rogers. And as Matthew already pointed out, we're likely chasing points on Bell. So I want to edit this ticket, Matthew. I want to get Bell out, but before I go there, I want to explain the other things that are happening. this was a ticket with a limited number of games. I think only a slate of 3 games. So I liked Spencer Ware as a running back, given my options, and I paired him, as has been my habit this week, with the Chiefs defense.
I think Tyreek Hill.
Go ahead.
I love Tyreek Hill. Have liked him most of the season. I think Travis Kelce is a solid play. I think it's kind of funny with the Ben Roethlisberger play. Why wouldn't you want to play an Alex Smith if you're going to do Tyreek Hill, Kelce, and Ware? Because that really stacks you.
Okay. Let's see what that allows me to do.
Just a thought. And he'll probably give you some value in the way of salary. But again, one of the things that I've been reading about and I've been following, you don't always have to use all of your $50,000 salary. You could use $48,500 and still be the most effective team out there. Just remember why you're doing it.
Right. I'm glad you make that point. It's always tempting to spend every dollar you have, but as we have said over and over on this program, sometimes it makes more sense to leave money on the table. And you're right to point out, part of the reason we've been able to do that is because we were on Tyreek Hill from the moment he started playing. And we did have a lot of success starting in midseason when he started playing, because we were using him every week. And of course, I was punished for that as an aside to viewers who care about my full season fantasy success. I was punished in week 15. I started Sammy Watkins over Tyreek Hill. Had I started Tyreek Hill, I would be in my fantasy championship this week. Because I started Watkins. I am out. Why didn't I have faith in Tyreek Hill when it counted? I've had faith in him all season. All right, so you make an excellent point, Matthew. I can put Alex Smith in, and since I'm already gambling on Kelce and Tyreek Hill, why not? Sure, I'm with you. This means I think I'm back to putting Lev Bell in, though, because of how much money I have left. Certainly, we have Lamar Miller out, and with this limited slate of games, you can see that we're talking about Cincy versus Houston, Baltimore versus Pittsburgh, Denver versus KC. I don't have a lot of choices here at running back. Certainly Lev Bell, given those choices, remains very attractive despite the steep cost. This leaves me with $1,700, Matthew. I'm not totally stoked about my Terrence West at flex play. Before I eliminate, is there anyone else that you'd want to address more than – I wasn't excited about West. Is there someone you're less excited about than West on this lineup?
Well, you now have $1,700 in your flex spot that you would – let's see what you can do with that. Miller is out. Jeremy Hill is a very solid play. He's probably the only guy who's going to be consistent in Cincinnati.
All right, let's quickly check in on where Jeremy Hill is on the FF Today ranks. 20th RB.
As a
Certainly, go ahead.
As a fill-in to take your space, take the value, it's not a bad play. The question is, you're taking $5,300. How much value do you have, and how much cash do you have left over? A Latavius Murray against Indianapolis at $6,200 might be better, or God forbid, he did go off in the first game as a flex play, might be a very nice play at $6,500. Todd Gurley.
I agree on both. I think those are great tips for the listeners, but I'm limited to just 3 games on this ticket. So those guys aren't available to me. I think
let's take the running backs and see what we've got.
Okay.
Because that's really what we want to look at. You want to get guys who are getting touches. We already talked about Alfred Blue. Lamar Miller is out. D'Angelo Williams, not a great play, especially when we know what you already have Le'Veon Bell in there.
Yeah.
Charkandrick West, no. Devontae Booker, not a chance.
Right. I think under these circumstances, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've either got Hill or you go back to your other option, which was West. And I think you're in a better option with Jeremy Hill. Now you have $800. Do you want to upgrade anything on the rest of your roster? Eli Rogers, you're playing with 3,800. Now you get a 46. I think you might be able to update it. But again, how many targets is he going to get? That's really what you're looking for in those value wide receivers.
Right. Here's the thing. If I could upgrade Eli Rogers to Antonio Brown, that would be tempting. But Eli Rogers is my featured player on this ticket. Not just because of the injury. I have some notes here on his stats that I need to share. He's coming off a big game in week 15. He had 75 yards in a TD. And people who've been paying attention to the Steelers, his best game of the season came in week 9 versus the Baltimore. That's the only time he broke 100 yards as a receiver. So he's going to have the rematch versus Baltimore. He's got injuries in the receiving core of the Steelers. So I want to gamble on him. He's my featured player. I'm not going to upgrade him. Tyreek Hill's part of my reason for moving to Alex Smith. Travis Kelce's, I think, probably the priciest tight end available in this slate of games. So I think Emmanuel Sanders costs more than Demaryius Thomas this week. So I'm looking at these players thinking, who could I upgrade? I think because it's just a limited slate of games, I don't think there is anyone I can upgrade. And we are past the 30-minute mark, so we need to get to your ticket, Matthew. Is there any final comment you want to make on this one?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
Let's get moved along.
So
what I'll do is I'll bring up what I have here, and I'll show you where I am. And I'm actually torn on my flex player on my last ticket that I'm trying to put together. So this is some nice commentary we'll have back and forth here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so let me bring this screen up for everybody. I'll share it. Come on, share. Let's go. Share my screen, and here we go. Okay, so like I've said most of the week, the marquee combo, I think, for the week, even though it's not a marquee game on TV, is the Drew Brees Antonio Gates, or sorry, the Phillip Rivers Antonio Gates combo.
Okay.
I want to keep Antonio Gates in my lineup no matter what as my tight end. So that was my thought process. He is going to be the guy everybody's focused on. And Rivers will not disappoint. But I did want to do the combination like you were talking about in the New Orleans game because Tampa Bay has got a reason to play this game. So I wanted to get in the combo of Brandon Cooks and Drew Brees. Cooks scored 2 touchdowns last week. I'm not chasing the points. I'm chasing the tendency. The tendency is to go to the air, and Brees probably good for 3 touchdowns this week. I loved your philosophy about the game in New England against the Jets. It's the only game that's going to have weather involved in it. Now, I already used Patriots as my defense on the other side. I happen to like Seattle at home playing against Arizona that seems to be kind of just shutting it off this season. We already have heard, and I don't know if you've read the commentary, Larry Fitzgerald is considering retirement after the end of the season. And it's probably true that he'll hang it up. So my question is, do they really have anything to play for except for David Johnson? If you shut down Johnson, Arizona pretty much has been checked out. Even against Carolina that beat them earlier on in the season. I thought that Arizona would eat Carolina alive. And both of them, I look at Carolina's defense and Seattle's defense and look at them very similarly, and that's why I'm taking Seattle. My problem is I'm left with a flex player, and I'm going, what do I do? I've got $3,800 left. I could play TJ Yeldon against Tennessee, but I think they're going to be playing from behind, and he's not going to get a lot of opportunities. You think that the New England game is going to be out of hand, and again, because of weather, it's an interesting play to play Michael Floyd just because it's his first action under center with regards to New England, and he does have capability of taking it deep. One of the things I didn't mention last week, however, is I happen to like, and in fact, Jalen Richards. Jalen Richard last week, he's a nice change of pace back for Latavius Murray and got me 9 points in last week's game. So with $3,800 left and trying to take advantage of some combos that aren't, stellar combos, but trying to put together something that I think might be interesting to play, I'm going to throw in Jalen Richard. What are your thoughts?
I love what the Jalen Richard price point does for you on the rest of the ticket. I can't quite make out how much do you have left on the table?
I have $200 left on the table.
Okay. So given that you're coming down to the wire on spending, I think Richard makes sense since he makes everything possible. I wouldn't go out of my way to gamble on Richard, but I see why under these circumstances he's an appealing gamble to you.
Go
ahead.
I could reduce my cost on defenses because I'm not sure I'm gaining that much more with Seattle, but I'm taking it as the safe play. The question is, do I want to take like a Houston's defense against Cincinnati, which is not going to have an AJ Green, not going to have a Gio Bernard, okay, and only has a banged up Jeremy Hill, who I'm actually playing.
Yeah, you make a strong case, man. The thing with me, with the main skill positions, when I'm talking the ones I feature, QB, RB, wideout, and tight end, with those, talent really does seem to translate to statistical performance. But with other positions in fantasy, kickers don't play on DraftKings, but defenses do. There is a flukiness built into it. So I am always reluctant to pay up for defenses. That doesn't mean that when I have money left over, I don't. But there's so much variance and so much unpredictability at the defensive position that I could see betting, especially in Week 16, as some teams are coasting into the playoffs. Other teams, even if they're on the playoff bubble, it doesn't really matter if they win or lose. Their seeding isn't going to change much. So you see that teams have different levels of motivation. It's impossible to predict how fiercely they'll play. And so it's hard for me to justify paying a lot of money for a defense. If you're talking about making significant savings at defense, I got to say, man, if you're willing to downgrade at Seattle and upgrade at Jalen Richard, I probably would.
Well, I would definitely do that. My thing here is I'm looking at, okay, I could drop this. Let's take Seattle out because, again, we've used different defenses. I actually have built tickets from the bottom up in the defense. I wouldn't use the Browns, but I'm actually thinking maybe I'll pay for the Chargers.
Why not? I mean, who have the Browns terrorized this season?
They haven't. And I could end up with $500 extra. I like Jalen Richard, but while I have now another $500 here under my flex, I'm now at $4,100. And at 41, I can add Isaiah Crowell in there as an offbeat play. And I think he will get me 12 points versus the 8. And that's the upgrade on the 500 points. $500 there. And
okay.
Right.
And here's something that's we touched on a little earlier. It seems odd. You're taking Kroll against the defense that's going to be facing him, right?
Yes.
So a lot of people are reluctant to do that. But the thing is, defenses, what people lose track of is defenses tend to score through forcing turnovers and defensive scores, that kind of thing. Holding the opposing running back to limited yards isn't what's going to make or break the Chargers defense this weekend. So I would say that what you're doing there isn't as contradictory if people look into it closely enough as it might seem to be on the surface.
Well,
does that make
sense? I agree with that. What I'm looking for in a flex player in that value is a guy who's going to get 3 to 6 receptions and going to get the touch, if they're running the ball, 10 to 15 times. That should get me somewhere between 8 and 10 points plus a touchdown.
Yeah, I like the thinking behind this ticket. I certainly like Drew Brees this week. If I were more quarterback centered rather than quarterback diverse in my tickets, I put Jordan Howard all across my tickets. I have a different quarterback in every ticket. But if I use Drew Brees in 2 different tickets, I might want to get a Michael Thomas play in as well as a Brandon Cooks play. But I totally get you got to pick one, and this is a great pick, I think.
Well, thank you. I'm going to stick with this ticket, and we'll come back and look at it next week. And I'm going to hit submit as we're here. And like you said, we've run over on our 30 minutes. We tried to get a lot of stuff in a 1 o'clock time frame on a Saturday when we normally do this for Sundays.
Right. We hope some people actually get to benefit from what we're doing here. We know the timeline's short. The thing is, our schedules are such that we just have to do this show on Saturdays, folks. So we hope it's as helpful as it can be, and that things will work out to the extent that they can for viewers. And again, we'll be back for the final week of the season next Saturday. So for Matthew Schiff and Next Man Up, this is Mike Davis signing off.